The final stretch before we get to surprise Arizona and spring training for your Kansas City Royals. We've hit it right now as we hear rumblings of a Bobby Witt Jr. contract extension. We'll discuss that. Are we coming up against the deadline? Is spring training going to act as that deadline for a Bobby Witt Jr. contract extension? I don't know. We'll find out. We'll see what JJ Piccolo had to say about things this past week. I had him on my radio show, the program on Sports Radio 810 WHP. What's at stake if the Royals don't get an extension done? Is the Royals roster set for spring training? What do we want to see once they get to surprise Arizona? Who breaks out? Who flops? We talk about it all right now on the Kaufman Corner podcast.
You're listening to Kaufman Corner, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kaufman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals, and former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kaufman Corner is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here's your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
Thank you, Curtis, and thank you for joining us. Remember, if you're catching us via the podcast, you can be a part of the conversation. We stream live. It's usually on a Sunday night at 10 p.m. Central Time. Sometimes it becomes a Monday when Rany is gallivanting all across the world. Then we have to do it when it fits Rany's schedule. It's just how it works. Settle down, folks. But we're coming to you live tonight, and thanks to all the folks joining us here in the chat room. We do appreciate it. Live tonight on a Sunday night, on a Sunday the 4th at 10 p.m. So make plans to join us next time if you're catching us via the podcast. Rany, we want to talk first about the Bobby Witt Jr. contract. We're going to hear something that JJ Piccolo said to me on the program this past week when he was on. But let's get your thoughts. What are you hearing, and what do you think it all means?
I'll tell you, it feels like a really banner time to be a Kansas City sports fan, my friend. The Chiefs landed in Las Vegas for the Super Bowl. Taylor Swift just announced a new album is dropping. And just a few hours before we went on the air, we're hearing some major rumblings now from multiple sources that the Royals and Bobby Witt are making progress on a Witt contract. And, we've been hearing, rumors of negotiations, of discussions for a while. This feels like the first time, though. This feels like a bit of a tipping point where they're getting close. It's not done. A lot of times, you can follow the progress of contract extensions through the rumor mill. Usually when you get to this point, it is all but a done deal, all but a fait accompli. This time I feel like the rumors maybe broke a little early. I don't think this is done. I don't think this is, sealed and delivered. I think where we are at is that the Royals have made a very reasonable offer. I have a feeling, and this is me reading through the tea leaves a little bit here, but I have a feeling that we're getting these leaks a little bit from the Royal side. I don't think this is coming from Witt's agency. But I think that the Royals feel like they are making enough progress here that they're putting this out there, trying to stir up some excitement, obviously for spring training, obviously for a stadium vote. But I am cautiously optimistic that we are going to see something here between now and the start of spring training.
I think that's interesting because I'm wondering if it isn't just reverberations from what JJ Piccolo said on my show and reverberations from what he said. We just had the Royal Rumble, or what is it, the Royal Fest, or right. What is it now? The Royal Rally, Royal Rumble. That'd be great. The Royal Rally, and I'm wondering if that's just where he said something similar to what he said to me, and that's echoing out. Oh, they're making progress. It's like, JJ, we're hearing this. This is what we're hearing. Listen, this is the time where people are kind of, out of things to discuss, right? If you write, if you tweet, you want something, you're looking for something anywhere. So I think it's interesting because almost always the side that's putting information out is the agent. Almost always. And so is it, the agent putting it out there to get some buzz, to get pressure on the team, to try to make something happen? I don't know. Is it the ball club? Because trying to gain buzz for a stadium vote, right? This is a little unique, as we've talked about all along, because the Royals do have a vote for a stadium coming up. And so that does make it a little unique as to how this one's operating.
Yeah, no, I think that's why I feel like, the team is sort of unusually incentivized to put this out there. And I'm not casting any aspersions or suggesting anything nefarious here, because either it's going to happen or it's not. Like, there's no point in trying to put rumors out about a contract extension to goose the stadium vote 2 months before the stadium vote, because if it doesn't happen between now and April, then it's actually going to probably backfire on the team if they're the ones putting this out. So I think there's definitely a lot of smoke here waiting to see the fire. The question I have is, what kind of extension will this be? Right? It's easy to say, oh, a Bobby Witt contract extension is a huge win for the Royals. You can't say that without knowing what the details are, because there's an enormous range of what a contract extension would look like. It could be, if it's he's 4 years away from free agency. If this is just a 5-year contract where they buy out 1 year of free agency, that's nice, but getting 1 year, one additional year of Bobby Witt is not a huge win. If this is a 14-year, $350 million contract, essentially a lifetime deal, the consequences are just enormously different. So, those are the two ranges here, where you're one where you're just buying out a year or maybe 2 years tops of free agency, one where you're essentially getting him to commit to, for the rest of his career. And then within that range, of course, are there club options? Are there player options? Like, there's so many different ways to structure a contract extension. A contract extension is not nearly enough information. In the middle of those two extremes is what I am assuming and sort of hoping, because I think it's actually a very good structure, is the model for the Bobby Witt contract extension, which is the Julio Rodriguez contract. And I think it's instructive to review that one very, very quickly, so people know what I'm talking about when I talk about the Julio Rodriguez contract. Julio Rodriguez, a little over a year ago, so they came up at the same time. Julio Rodriguez and Bobby Witt entered the majors at the same time. But Julio signed a long-term contract at the end of his rookie year. It wasn't even finished. It was like in August. But let's say he had 1 year of service time versus 2. He signed 7 years, $119 million as the foundation, the base contract. That bought out 2 years of free agency. But on top of that, at the end of the 7 years, there is a club option for 8 years, the value of which depends on his success in MVP voting. The money is a separate issue, but the point is he signed for 7 years guaranteed. The club has an 8-year option. So in theory, they could have him for 15 years. If they decline the 8-year option, he then has a 5-year option, which still binds him to the team. But the point being is it caps his downside at the same time that it caps, or I should say, it caps their downside, the team's downside, but it also caps his upside, because if he turns out to be a true transcendent superstar, the team gets to keep him for the rest of his career. If he turns out to have a disappointing career, he's guaranteed not just the 7-year contract, but an additional $90 million over 5 years. So his minimum guarantee is $200 million, but the team's upside is they get to keep him for the life of his career. So in a way, it gives both sides the security that both sides want. That's why I consider this to be a really smart model. And if that's the model the Royals may use it, and I assume the numbers will be higher for a variety of reasons. They waited until later in his career. Obviously time has passed, etc. He has a little more leverage because he has more generational wealth from his own signing bonus as well as his family's. But the structure, if that's what we're getting, that is something I'll be very excited about.
A couple things I want to touch on here real quick. First of all, Kurt said no show on Sunday. For next Sunday, excuse me, meaning Super Bowl Sunday. Yes, you're right. We'll be on Monday next Sunday. We're already planning that. So, yes, a week from now, we'll be on Monday. A couple other things that people were wondering what was flashing up here. Sean said happy 100. And then we also had, where was the other one? So we said, good memory, Sean. Was it Kurt? Somebody remembered that it's our 100th episode. So a happy 100th Kaufman Corner to all the folks that tune in for it and for Rany. So yes, that is here it is. Curtis said good memory. Yes, happy 100. Thank you very much. We do appreciate it. I'll say this as far as, and I think you're right about the Rodriguez contract. From what I've heard, though, Bobby Witt Jr., I don't think there's any chance he goes for 15 years. In fact, I think if this contract gets done, people will be disappointed in its length. That's what I think. I don't think it's 10, 12 years. I think it's going to be shorter because I think Bobby Witt knows that he's given up a lot if he gives all that up, if he's as good as he thinks he is. So we will see, but I'll bet he's back on the free agent market. What is he now, 23?
He is 23 and a half, yes. He'll be 24 in June.
I'll bet he's out there no later than 30 years old.
If he's out there at 30, then you're only getting 2 years of free agency. And to me, that would be disappointing. If it's, and again, there's maybe a scenario in which if he has an opt out, that would be disappointing because again, then you cap the team's upside. From the Royals perspective, from a Royals fan perspective, you obviously want to have the ability to keep him as long as possible. But the most important years, the peak years, are obviously going to be his years in his 20s and maybe his early 30s. Like if they can at least keep him for 8 seasons, so until he's 31 and a half, almost 32, everything beyond that would be gravy. But if you can get 4 additional years beyond when his free agency started, scheduled to start, as a guarantee, if he does well, you can still keep him. In other words, he cannot opt out before then. I will consider that a success for the Royals. Again, we'll see what the money is, the structure, et cetera. But I would like to see 8 years as a minimum here.
I think we all agree it's going to take a lot more to buy out an American player that was raised in wealth as the son of a major leaguer than it is, an international player that I don't know. Julio Rodriguez may come from a lot of money. I have no idea what his background is. Many times the international signees are not, the Latin players are not, and they're willing to sign earlier because it means more to their family. It changes the outlook of their family there much quicker. We will see. By the way, thank you for the congrats from the folks. And like Fake Dave Moore said, thank you to our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly bringing you the Kaufman Corner podcast, nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. You can find them online at GannAsphalt.com. Quit worrying about your parking lot. Get it brightly striped today. Concrete bumpers, signage, everything you need to make a parking lot move smoothly and safely so that you can focus on your business, not deal with liability issues. Again, go to GannAsphalt.com. One contractor, all things parking lot, Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Let's hear what it was JJ Piccolo had to say on the signing of Bobby Witt. I asked him this past week, basically just for an update on where things stand on the negotiations with Bobby Witt Jr. and his crew.
Yeah, I'm happy to say that we continue to stay engaged in conversations. I know that Bobby and his representation feel good about Kansas City and what it represents for Bobby. So it's still a work in progress, but the discussions are ongoing. Bobby said publicly, we've said publicly, our desires to try to reach a deal. These things are complicated, though. It takes a little bit of time, and a player, as much as they may want to stay in one city, they have great opportunity in the game and in the industry. And Bobby's a superstar in this game, or a budding superstar in this game, who we believe in quite a bit. And it just may take some time to work this thing out. But I'm happy to say that there are ongoing discussions about it, and they're happening pretty regularly.
I would take that to mean that it's not imminent, right? But that the discussions are ongoing, you said. So, would I be safe to say it's not going to happen before spring training?
Well, I'd love to tell you that it would. don't really have a feel for it, whether or not it would. But I do think we have to be cognizant too that Bobby's he's a very talented player, and the thing we want him to focus on once we get to March 28th is the season. So a bulk of our discussions will be happening between now and then, and hopefully we come to some type of resolution and we can move on from there.
Sounds like the regular season, March 28th is the deadline. Right?
Yes, I agree. I was going to say at first I thought he was going to say spring training. I'm like, you can negotiate these things on the backfields of Arizona. I don't think we have to worry about him being distracted there. But I remember the Alex Gordon contract extension, the original one, and it felt like I remember then opening day was sort of the deadline, and I'm trying to see if I can find it here, but I believe he got that signed in the days before opening day, like late March. So I feel like that is the latest they can go. I mean, based on what we're hearing, there's a chance this may be done before spring training or, before spring training games start. So sometime in February would be a goal. But I think once the season starts, usually this is a tradition in the sport. Players will put negotiations on hold. You need kind of a hard deadline in order to force action to occur. And teams knowing what that deadline is, either you get it done or you don't by then.
Yeah. What's your gut tell you? Does it get done or not?
Today, honestly, right now, after these rooms, I feel like, I said this, I feel like it's a tipping point. This is the first time I actually feel like a contract's going to get done. I would have put it at less than 50-50 until today, but I'm hearing too much smoke to think that this, it's easy to say we're negotiating, which just means we've made an offer and the other side, doesn't mean the other side's shown interest. What I'm sensing now is they are close enough now that both sides actually are motivated to get done. Up until now, my concern has always been, is Bobby Witt motivated to sign along, to commit to the Royals? Forget about the money. It's about the commitment to, winning that this organization needed to show to convince a guy who has tremendous leverage to commit a huge chunk of his career to this organization. And I sense now that Bobby Witt is willing, if the numbers and the years, et cetera, match up, he is willing to commit more of his career to this organization, which is a good sign for the Royals. I think it also, and if this happens, I think we can look back at this offseason and all the things that they've done, signing Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha and, even Hunter Renfroe and some of the signings that I'm not as big about as, not just an investment in the 2024 Royals and trying to win a few more games, but also an investment in trying to convince their franchise superstar young player to sign long-term with the team. And if he does sign, I think you have to look at this entire offseason in a more successful light, because it all led to that moment.
I do want to point something out. March 28th is before the vote.
Mm-hmm.
So if the idea is to generate the buzz, like, well, they're talking, I'm going to go ahead and vote yes because they're talking to them, we're going to know
exactly
if the 28th is it, there'll be a deadline, which to me, if you're putting this stuff out there, kind of lends itself to that, like, okay, if it is indeed coming on the Royals side, then they feel like things are going pretty well, right?
Exactly.
Because they don't want to set this up and then right before they send people to the polls, have it be, contract talks are off.
100%. It's a good thing for I think the fan base that the stadium vote happens to be after opening day, because we will know at that time when people go to the polls, they will know if Bobby Witt is signed or not. If they're still saying, well, we're negotiating, no, you're not negotiating during the season. JJ Piccolo told you on your show they don't intend to let this drag into the season. So if he's not signed on voting day, he's not signed. And the Royals have to know that. And so they wouldn't put this out there unless they're optimistic he'll sign. And look, you can be cynical and say, well, they're only doing this in order to get a stadium passed. And yeah, maybe they are, but you know what? Contracts are binding. They're binding for a reason. Like, it doesn't matter ultimately if this is a cynical move on their part just to get people revved up for the stadium, because once he's signed, he's signed. Now, we talked about this with Jeff Passan. It's like they could pull a Marlins here and trade him a year later, but I'm going to assume that there are going to be clauses in the contract that prevent such such things from happening. And if the Royals in good faith manage to get him signed, I think in good faith we will assume that they're not going to pull a switcheroo here, and as soon as they get their stadium, slash the payroll to the bone. Now, they certainly could not replace all of the free agents that they've signed to 2-year contracts in 2 years. Maybe they don't go out and spend money in 2 years, but they're still going to have Bobby Witt under contract. So, I think you can't prove that John Sherman is now committed to winning, but even if he signs Bobby Witt, it's not sufficient, but it is necessary. It's only a first step, but you have to take that first step. He will need to build on that, but without signing Bobby Witt, he's never going to be able to convince people that he's not fully committed to making this a winning organization. So this is a good sign that they're really pushing forward with this.
He did go on to talk about that. He said, things, he said in the past, you definitely have to look at, because I asked him, I said, well, is there a deadline to get something done before it's like, well, we don't have anything done, so now we have to trade him. And he said in the past, it was with 2 years remaining on a player's contract that you'd want to do that. He said, but, times are kind of changing. We saw Juan Soto bring a hefty return leaving Washington, but also going, he said, it depends on what club's trying to acquire him, which I think he was pretty much saying that, well, if you're sending him to the Yankees, Mets, Dodgers, Angels, teams that have big bucks, it could be one of those where, okay, we've got the return that we've got. You see if you can get a contract done, and he goes willing to sign with the other team. Therefore, the return is higher. But it's still lessons. Like, now is the time to really get it done and know that you've got the player. Or in the next, I would say 12 months, it's the time to get him traded.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we've discussed this on the show, and obviously, the unpopular but necessary opinion that if you don't get him signed, that you have to think about trading him. And you've just a week ago when we were talking with Jeff Passan, and it didn't. We were not in as optimistic a space regarding a Bobby Witt contract extension. We were discussing the possibility of trading him, and not trading him in 2 years, but trading him maybe as soon as next year. And to me, it is kind of reassuring hearing JJ acknowledge the fact that, yes, you could trade him with 2 years left and you'll get a good return, but you could actually increase that return by doing it 2.5 or 3, years ahead. The stark difference on this one issue between him and Dayton Moore about the transactionality, the need to, see your players as assets. And sometimes if you're going to have to move on from them, move on when you can maximize their value. I think his comments certainly demonstrate that. We saw the unfortunate downside of doing it the Dayton Moore way just recently, when the Royals, after making the Adam Frazier signing official, they had opened up a spot on the 40-man roster. They traded Samad Taylor to the Mariners for cash considerations, which basically means that the entire return they got for Whit Merrifield, which was Samad Taylor and Max Castillo, are no longer in the organization. I think they combined for 43 games in a Royals uniform, minimal contributions. We had the one nice moment from Samad in his debut, but Whit Merrifield, who at one point could have brought back an enormous return. Dayton Moore just refused to acknowledge the reality, slapping him in the face that your team is not going to win, soon enough to take advantage of this very good player you have. So I'm glad to see that JJ seems to have learned the lessons from that, and is on this one issue
always had the knowledge and just was overruled.
Right. The point is he sees it differently.
I just want to make sure we don't come down as condescending, like, well, he had no idea.
No, I agree. I think my understanding is this was a very much a Dayton Moore thing. It wasn't something, what was so exasperating was it wasn't a difficult lesson to learn. It wasn't like this was some newfangled idea in baseball that, you should trade your players while they still have, years of club control to maximize their return. This is just, basic fundamental logic. And Dayton Moore had a different philosophy, but JJ seems to be in sync with the rest of the sport, which is good.
We're brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. With free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project coming with a written warranty, Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer, helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Let's talk about the rest of the roster. We know Bobby Witt Jr. will be at spring training. Rany, is this it? Or do you still think there's a shot at a third baseman? Shot at a closer? Like, do you think that the Royals are done?
The answer I would give you is probably done, but it's a cop out to say it depends, but it does depend in part because JJ did make an interesting comment when asked about this recently, which was that, and I don't remember the exact words, but that they were going to be opportunistic. With the market, and what I sensed from that was basically there are still quite a few players that are. I mean, spring training starts in 2 weeks or less, and there are still a lot of really good players on the free agent market. If there are deals to be had, if there are bargains to be had, I think the Royals are going to keep lines of communication open, which is a good thing. I will say this: when they signed Adam Frazier, I said this last week on the show. 1 year and a $4.5 million commitment is not a bad contract for a player who maybe is a little stretched to be a starter, but is a really good utility guy. My concern was that they were going to trade Michael Massey because having two left-handed hitting second basemen on your roster seemed a little superfluous. But over the past week, it seems increasingly clear that we can take the signing at face value, which is they signed Adam Frazier to be sort of a super utility sub, that they are, at least for the time being, committed to going into spring training with Michael Massey penciled in, not penned in, but penciled in as their starting second baseman. And right now, they actually have a decent bench. Like Adam Frazier's, they're paying him $4.5 million a year to be a bench player, which, maybe a little bit of a luxury, but honestly not that much of a luxury. $4.5 million 1 year, you're not committed to him beyond this next year. Injuries happen. If anybody goes down, Frazier can fill in, or Garrett Hampson can fill in. They've got their positions covered. So, if I don't know, Matt Chapman is somehow available on like a 1 year deal in a couple weeks, could they kick the tires there? Maybe. And frankly, they should. You should always be looking to improve your team if possible. But I think it would have to be a real bargain for them to adjust, certainly on the hitting side, to adjust their opening day roster at this point.
Injuries happen, right? That's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Frazier can play the outfield.
Mm-hmm.
That's another. And I think platoons and days off and mixing and matching lineups against people, which it's not just left, right. Like that's old school. That's a lot of it. But, as we know, swing planes and different things like that are a part of the equation. And if the Royals, who are expanding the analytics department, as we talked about with Daniel Mack when we had him on not long ago, it does seem that, that they're trying to build depth on the roster and be able to use everybody. And listen, maybe there is a trade coming that, somebody gets moved and, you have to give up one of the young guys as part of the equation. Maybe it's Michael Massey. I don't think so. I think they like Massey, but I think they've got insurance now at second base for injury if he doesn't work. And I think, there's nothing wrong with getting legitimate big leaguers to play on your team unless you're blocking young players, which we talked about. And Joe Sheehan was adamant that Samad Taylor, was basically the same guy, right? Like production-wise,
right,
in getting there. That's the question. They have to be right about that. They're in the get-it-right business. They have to have been like, we don't see it in Taylor, and we think we're going to get more here. And I think this is the first year, Matt Quatrero's had a voice in how this roster is being put together. And it's not an evaluation year. That's done. In fact, we're going to hear from JJ here in a little bit. I'll tell you what I think we can draw from kind of where their expectations are. But, so if the guy wants certain elements on his bench to be able to go get things done, you give it to him. And now there's no excuses.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is on paper, at least, a much better, or certainly much more accomplished bench than they've had in the past. I mean, their backup catcher, Freddie Fermin, to everyone's surprise, turned into a really decent, player as a rookie last year. And the kind of guy where he could be a starter for a few months, and you wouldn't necessarily feel it. And then Frazier has the bat; he doesn't really have the glove. Hampson has the speed, um, maybe not necessarily the bat, but they both can play multiple different positions. Um, there's you know those three bench spots are guaranteed. There's one, maybe two spots on the bench that are still open. Dyron Blanco could get it. Nick Lofton. The question I have here is, what does this do with Nick Lofton? And if it means that he goes back to AAA because he had a good year but not a great year, and they hope that he can dominate and then force his way onto the roster or force a trade. Um, that's there are worse things in the world than having one of your best prospects who might be major league ready sitting, cooling his heels in AAA and dominating, waiting for an opportunity to show up. So there's nothing wrong with having a really good bench. The issue is the starting lineup itself is weak in places. Like it doesn't do you a great job, do you that much good to have a great bench if Kyle Isbell is hitting 220 or whatever. Like, you actually want your starters to be elite a lot more than your bench. But now if Isbell falls flat on his face, they have options. If MJ Melendez regresses, they have options. So I think that the roster as constituted right now is certainly an improvement over last year's, and there is still some upside here with some of the young guys.
Yeah, I agree, and I think just having a better lineup. Their Sunday lineups are just like what, like come on. And so day game after a stretch, being able to put a quality player out there, by quality I mean legitimate big leaguer out there, will make this club better. And we listen a lot. Jeff Passan wasn't blowing smoke last week, wasn't quite as down as Joe Sheehan was several weeks ago when we had him on. But I will say this: there is something to be said, like, you can't go get the best free agent when you're way down here. I don't care what Joe Sheehan has to say that, Cody Bellinger is not coming to Kansas City. Like, there's no amount of money, right? There just isn't, because any amount you'd say, well, he'd come for $1 trillion. I know they're not offering $1 trillion. There's no realistic path to him coming here. But have this team go out and go 500. Have a couple of the young guys either Massey become a 25 home run, 340 on base hitting second baseman, so stabilize the rotation with the moves that they made, and one other prospect come along. Gentry hits and is whatever you want to dream a dream, right? Mazzucato rockets through, and all of a sudden it starts to look like, okay, we're seeing something here. Then you can go shop at the next level up, right? And I think that's what this season is about, is to improve the floor, because nobody wants to play for a bottom feeder. Right. So if your floor is no longer a bottom feeder, then you can go get better free agents. You can get people to stay. That's what this is all about. So get better, and then next year you start from here and go up from there. It makes sense to me. I mean, is it all fixed? No. But is the ball club better? Yes.
Well, but I would say even beyond that, if the goal may be to raise the floor, but honestly, if the goal was simply to get Bobby Witt signed to a long-term deal, then that in itself is a success. Even if he signs, then even if they do go out there and disappoint and lose 95 games, maybe Witt has some buyer's remorse. But if he's signed, then you've accomplished that, because the problem with having him only for the next 4 years is, if it's not going to work, if you're going to trade him, you need to trade him with 2 or even 3 years all left on that contract. So in other words, if they don't get him signed and they go on anything less than a really successful year, next winter they have to make that decision: do we trade him now, or do we risk losing value? If he signs away 2, 3, 4, however many years of free agency, it actually buys you some time that you don't have to rush the rebuild. And if you go out and you lose 95 games this year, that's a disappointment, but you don't have to panic. You have another 3 or 4 years before you have to make that decision with him. So really, like, if they get Witt signed, whatever improvement they have during the regular season this year is actually going to be just a cherry on top.
By the way, I love this one. Breaking with some news. Again, if you're catching us via the podcast, we're streaming live here on Sunday night. Breaking news, Taylor Swift just won Album of the Year, first person to win it 4 times. Rany is an OG Swiftie, so congrats to you, Rany, as she...
Thank you. I take that congratulations with great appreciation. So four titles has a nice ring to it. Sitting here with my Chiefs jersey on. So
as the Chiefs go for their 4th Super Bowl win, 3rd in the Mahomes Andy Reid era. I asked Rany when we got on here tonight, do you have another shirt? And it's like the only thing he's been wearing for like several weeks. He said, I'm not breaking a streak, right? Things are.
We all have to do our part, Soren.
Yeah, not fixing
what the least I can do.
I appreciate that. I like that. Well done. Well said. What do we want to see in spring training, Rany?
Okay, I mean, beyond the obvious, nobody getting hurt, avoiding any Tommy John surgeries would be nice. The things I will be looking at, I think more on the pitching side. It's so much harder to evaluate hitters anyway because of the quality, but with the pitchers, at least you can look at things like velocity and spin, and we have metrics, right? I will be, we will not be seeing Chris Mubich, on the mound until well after spring training, so we can put him aside. The things I'll be looking at, I want to see that Cole Reagan's is the velocity and stuff is still kind of at least comparable last year, just because
that was my number one.
It was so good last year.
Yeah.
You fear the worst there. It's like, is he still really, topping out in the high 90s, or, was that all just a 1-year fever dream? I remember Jeremy Affeldt. So I remember what it was like when a pitcher just shows stuff that seems too good to be true. And then it never is harnessed. I mean, in Regan's case, he's harnessed it in the regular season for two solid months, but I want to see that. And then the other guy I'm really looking to see is Daniel Lynch. I want to see what Daniel Lynch has got, if the velocity is ticking up there a little bit, and his secondary stuff, if he's got good command of everything, because he is the guy that I'm really hoping will take a step forward on the pitching staff.
Yeah, I'm with you. Cole Reagan's was number one. I mean, I just want him to look like that was not a mirage or just one little hot streak. Danny Duffy would have those moments where you're like, oh my God, here we go. He's Cliff Lee. This guy's going to win a Cy Young. And then it's like, okay, no, that was just 8 starts. It's just one stretch. And so Cole Reagan's was number one on my list as well. I thought you might be going there. And I would like to hear nothing about the health of Vinny Pasquantino, right? I'd like to just I'd like him. I know we said, well, that everybody's healthy. So, yes, we don't want anyone to get hurt. But I'd like Vinny Pasquantino, somebody said lose in spring training and then win when April rolls around, because the Royals are always really good in spring training. I definitely agree with that, but I just want Vinny Pasquantino to look the part, because I think that is such an underrated part of this equation. If you have Cole Reagan's for the whole year, their record was, again, better in the second half and coming down the stretch. And that goes for a lot of reasons. Teams that are out of it quit trying, and guys who could play or get surgery. If their team's out of it, they get surgery. There's all these different things that factor into why it's not spring training numbers, but you can't overinflate it. But Cole Reagan's was a huge part of it. That'd be great. But if you can drop a 30 home run bat, that's going to really get on base into the middle of this lineup. It's huge. It's huge. And so those are the two biggest things I think to look forward to. But yeah, I'm with you. I'd like to see some real competent pitching. I know that you're in every game every night. And then let's see what Matt Quatraro can come up with. Let's see what, all the data will do for you, because you can't take a knife into a gunfight and expect math to get you past. We saw that last year. If you're a competitive club, then maybe we can see that, oh, wow, they're getting a little advantage here all over the place. But I think it starts with they need a guy at the top of the rotation and they need a guy in the middle of the lineup. And those are the two guys that can do it.
Absolutely. No, Pasquantino is a good one because, quietly, when we talk about why were the Royals so disappointing last year, not having Pasquantino for 4 months, and having him, he was basically, hitting at an elite Pasquantino-ish level for April. But then, he hit terribly in May, and it turns out he was probably playing hurt. And that's what I want to see. It's not so much, it's a base expectation that he's not actually hurt in spring training, that he's not limited. But you want to actually see that he is swinging the ball, swinging freely, hitting the ball hard. He's the one guy where I don't care so much about the actual results, but exit velocities and things like that. I want to see, that he looks to be 100%, because if you want to have it, the optimistic case for this team is that they played at a close to 500 clip in the second half without Pasquantino. And that was the one thing they were really missing from their lineup, even in the second half. I mean, they had pop from Velasquez and, Bobby Witt obviously was taking a step forward, but having that high on base, just pure hitter in the middle of the lineup, they didn't have that in the second half, and they still finished close to 500. So having Pasquantino, at hitting 290 with the 380 on base and 25 to 30 home runs would be just an enormous lift for them.
I'm not going to put up the comment. I can put up the comment, but if you're on YouTube, Cotman, that's funny. Okay, that's funny stuff. If you're watching on YouTube, you can check out Cotman's quote talking about not taking bats to the plate, not taking knives to the plate. That's funny stuff. I need more comments to come in, so that will move up because I'm laughing every time I look at it. I'm having a hard time keeping a straight face. And I know Randy's like, "Why are you giggling at what
I'm not that funny, Soren. What did I say?
I just literally have a picture of that guys going to the plate, and that's in my head, and I'm having a hard time getting. I'm having a hard time getting.
All right, I'm gonna have to change the subject here. Get you off of this. Get that image out of your head.
Well done, Cotman. Well done. Again, I'm not going to put it up, but if you're watching on YouTube, it's good stuff. It's pretty funny. I want to talk about what do we want to see, what do we expect. At the end of last year, I think it was in their season wrap-up press conference, JJ said that their models had them winning a lot more games going into last year. You and I famously both picked them to win 77 games. And you're not helping, Bruce. Had them 77 games. And we said, I'm just going to have to do this. Had them winning 77 games. It didn't come to fruition. Pasquantino would have helped. Cole Reagans for a whole year would help. Like your models having you near 500. Cole Reagans didn't have anything to do with that because he wasn't on the team. But, Vinny Pasquantino did. But so when I was talking to JJ last week on the radio show, the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB, by the way, you can hear the whole conversation if you go to the podcast page at 810WHB.com. But I brought that up, that he said, hey, the models looked a lot better. And so I asked him, I said, okay, well, if they looked a lot better last year, then I would think it would be fair game for what do the models say it looks like this year?
Yeah, the models are still evolving because the clubs aren't set yet. So, but we do monitor, and the best way to categorize it right now is in the American League Central. There's a very small gap between the top of the division and the bottom of the division, and with the variance in those models, you're kind of looking at a lot of teams that could be right around 500. So while we're not completely going to trust the number right now. It's more of the spread between the top and the bottom that makes our division very competitive. That's where I think there's a bigger difference or in our favor between this year and last year, at least going into the season. But again, Cody Bellinger shows up in the American League Central, that changes things. So until we go to opening day, we put some credence into the win expectancy, but not until we get to opening day are we really going to say, okay, now we have a better idea of how we compare to our rivals in the Central.
All right. I do get it. Like there's still, Plinko chips to come down and fall in where it is. And he mentioned one of the big ones, Bellinger. One I took away, the Royals aren't entertaining the idea of Bellinger, even if there's some pillow 1 year, $30 million deal to go hit the free agent market. Next year, it certainly doesn't sound like the Royals are going to be in on Cody Bellinger. And I get his point there. But he said it's a narrow spread. I'm assuming with that statement, he's putting the Royals in that top to bottom mix, right? He's not saying here's what the other four teams are. He's putting the Royals in there. And he said it's very tight. It's very condensed around 500. Define what around 500 is. Is it 80 to 82 wins? Is it only 81 wins? I don't think so. But I don't think it's any more than 77 to 87 wins. And it would seem to me that he's putting his club in there that, again, their expectation is that this club is going to be up around 500. Do you take that from what he said?
More or less, yes. I mean, when you say, well, there's not a big spread of talent, a big spread of wins in the division, the very obvious conclusion from that is you think your team can contend. You think your team will be in the thick of the race. And yes, it's in part because you are in the American League Central, where 500 might get you in contention. But I mean, yeah, he's saying that even if he thinks the range isn't 77 to 87, maybe he's saying it's 74 to 84. But even then, fine. I mean, if 74 is the low end of where the Royals think they're going to be, it doesn't take more than a little bit of luck, one or two breakouts, and maybe a nice trade at the deadline to add talent to get yourself into position to contend in September. So uh, I think we certainly need to hold the Royals to that, in the sense of, if they go out and lose 95 or 100 games and then tell us at the end of the year that they never thought they had a chance to begin with, we got to call them out on that, right? Because I take from that he's not saying they will win the division, but he's saying that they will certainly be, a factor. They will not be eliminated before Memorial Day, like they have seemingly every year since they went to the World Series. Now the danger here is, when you have a model, you have to remember, even when we have models that project what teams will do. Let's say your model showed all 5 teams in the American League will finish 81 and 81. I'm just play with me here. Even if you have a model that is very accurate and correctly projects that all 5 teams in the American League Central are on paper 500 teams, that they will win half their games, they're coin flips, you still cannot then say the winner of the division will win 81 games, because of those 5 teams, some will have good luck, some will have bad luck. And so the problem is, when you assume that everybody in the division is mediocre at best, is that sheer luck. You flip a coin 162 times, and it's a fair coin. It might end up being 81. It might end up being 73. It might end up being 89. You run 162 coin flips as a trial, and you do 5 separate trials. One of those is going to end up being 85 or 90, right? So even if the teams are 500 on paper, one of them is going to have to exceed that. So the point is, you cannot just say, well, our goal is 81. If we win 81 games, we're going to be tied for first place at the end of the year. Like, somebody is going to get hot. Somebody is going to get lucky. Maybe the Royals, but you have to assume bare minimum 85 wins to really be, have a chance at a playoff spot. Now, of course, you can reevaluate in July, because you can add talent. So if you are within 3 or 4 games of, a playoff spot at the deadline, the Royals are going to have a very interesting decision to make. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. I think even that would be a big success, a big step forward, if they're even in position to entertain adding talent at the deadline. It's been a long time since they've done that. But I just want to make that point clear, that you can't assume, even if they think all the teams are around 500, that 500 is going to be good enough to make it to the playoffs.
All right, let's finish with this: breakouts and flops. Who you got? Who you feel like they're going to break out? Who you feel like is going to flop? You want to go negative first? Finish positive?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's always in positive.
Give me your flop, and I'll give you mine.
I don't. I'm not predicting this, but let's just say the flop I'm worried about the most, that I think that we maybe are not giving enough attention to, that could happen. Salvador Perez turns 34 in May. And, he's had a lot of innings on those knees over the years. He has, after he came back from his Tommy John, missed season, hitting the best he's ever has. And then he's declined 3 years in a row. Last year, his OPS plus was just 94. And I'm just, worried if, when the end comes, and it may come fast. And I don't know how well, the Royals have Freddie for me, but that's going to be it's going to be very difficult to have that conversation with Salvador Perez to make him the backup, like to bench Salvador Perez. So that's the one I think that could really derail things for the Royals, if Salvador goes out there and he just doesn't have it anymore at the plate.
Okay. I will go with Freddie for me. I listen, and maybe that's weak, because it's like, well, we don't even think he's going to start. But I think there's a reason why he wasn't supposed to be as good as he was. And I think guys can come up in a short sample size. And then when it was time for everyone to start honing in and coming at him, he kind of then his playing time was like watered down again. So, that's not a big one. If you wanted a bigger one, I don't think, well, I'm very worried that Pasquantino is just going to be forever hurt. Non-athletes get hurt, and he's not a big athletic guy. But I'm going to think positive, and I'm going to take Freddie Fermin to just be more of a what it seemed like he was supposed to be, just a defense guy, and for the offense to take a step back. Who breaks out, Rany?
So can I give you two names here?
Yes,
because okay, the one is the statistical case, and it's actually why I'm happy we have not seen him traded here in the last week, and that's Michael Massey.
Oh, you suck.
Well, I mean, we'll see what your rationales are, but I have two reasons for that. One is, which I think is well known, is that he started last year just terrible, right? He was just in April. If you just take April out, right, from May 2nd on, his overall numbers, he hit 229 with a 274 on base and a 381 slug. You take out April, it's 243, 296, 426. I mean, keep in mind, 15 home runs he hit for the season as a second baseman is actually one of the higher home run totals of any second baseman in the game. If he takes a little bit of a step forward, it just gets out of the gate, better. From May on, he struck out 68 times in 380 plate appearances. That's an exceptional. That's like 17% strikeout rate, 17.5, which is very good especially for a middle infielder with some pop. So the case is there that he was take out April, he's much better. The other thing though, the other reason why I like him is that based on his batted ball data, he was actually one of the unluckier players in major leagues last year. Like his weighted on base average was 283. His expected weighted on base average, basically based on exit velocity, launch angle, all that stuff, what it should have been was 319, which is league average or even slightly better. That discrepancy, a 36-point discrepancy, is one of the largest in all of baseball. So basically, he's one of the unluckiest hitters in the league. He
still wasn't great. There still wasn't great exit velocity, though.
Yeah, his exit velocity was 88.6 to major league average was 88.4. So average. Again, I'm saying he's not going to say he's a superstar, but if he's an average major league hitter and an average or even slightly above average defender at second base, that is an above average player. Now, there's a wide range between what he was last year and an above average player. But if he's just a league average everyday player, that has a lot of value, and I think he's underrated. And I that's why I do not want to see the Royals giving up on him or selling low. There's a trade to be had for equal talent, fine. But otherwise, I do hope that they go into the season with him as a starter, Frazier as the backup, and let's find out if Michael Massey can take that step forward.
Yeah, 600-ish plate appearances is not enough to write the whole story, and I'm with you. And the Royals have certainly had a positive outlook for him. So I'm going to assume that there's more there. That's why I went to Michael Massey. I'm going to go with my second one because I don't want to get beat to the punch twice. I'm going to give you my second breakout candidate. And this will surprise some people because I am tired of screwing around.
I think I know where you're going. You're taking my other guy.
Good, because we usually end up thinking the same way. But they have stuck with MJ Melendez for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I actually think he might break out is because I think he's going to see a lot of time at DH and maybe in a platoon. It gives him a chance to maybe get going and get some numbers. So I don't think, like by breakout, I don't think you're going to see 34 home runs or something like that. But part of a productive platoon, I can see that. And from where he's been, that would be breaking out. So I'll take MJ Melendez.
I completely agree. I'm very surprised given your widely expressed opinion about him on this show that you think he's capable of that. But I agree. And here's a simple.
Let me just be clear. I'm not a scout, and I can't look at a guy and tell you what things are going on. So everything I do is based upon watching and covering teams and who's good at it. And if that team says he's good, then I think he's good. Watching and covering other media people, We always mention I love Keith Law and the prospects of Keith Law. It's kind of my Bible of prospects. He doesn't hit it 100%. Nobody does, right? But you study it and you start to learn what to watch. They just won't come off this guy, and so there's a genuine belief on their end they wouldn't come off Alex Gordon, right? And eventually it clicked,
and they were right?
So that's it's not that I see something in MJ Melendez.
Okay,
I don't.
but it's that you have sufficient faith in the Royals that the fact that the Royals are committed to him is not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. That's a reflection of what you think of them, which is good. I'm going to bring one simple, very basic stat split to bear here. Before the All-Star break last year, MJ Melendez hit 206 with a 289 on base and a 333 slug. After the All-Star break, and again, he was playing every day. I mean, this is not a small sample size. He hit 273, 352 on base, 485 slugging. For all the arguments that you and I have had about MJ Melendez, what is this guy? Will he ever produce? He might have been producing all along for the last half. He may have already figured things out in the sense that you just take those numbers, even at DH, 350 on base and a 480 slug, even if he has no defensive value whatsoever, that'll play. And he is still just 25 years old. So if he takes even a slight step forward, there are ways for him to contribute even without ever putting a glove on. So, and like you said, the fact that the Royals seem to really believe in him, even, to the point of, trying to let him catch and having him learn the outfield on the fly in the middle of a season, they believe in that bat. So I am very interested to see if he can, repay their faith this year.
It'd be giant if those two broke out. And Pascatino was what they thought he could be, and Bobby Witt Jr. maintains. Now you're starting to get somewhere.
Now you have a lineup, yeah.
Yeah, you can squint and see it. That's the thing. Next Monday, when we podcast next, because it'll be Super Bowl Sunday next Sunday. Next Monday, we will be on the eve of spring training, right?
I believe so, the 12th, yeah. So they open right around Valentine's.
Yeah, so very close to the season getting going. So there it is. We're proudly brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Free consultations, no commissions. Every project comes with a written warranty. Gann Asphalt and Concrete can allow you to focus on your business, take away any and all problems with your parking lot. One contractor, all things parking lots. Tell them you heard about him here on the Kaufman Corner podcast. For the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, my name is Soren Petro, saying thank you very much for joining us here on Kaufman Corner.